The bass in Lynott thrummed against the soles of Mia Carter's shoes, a constant, rhythmic heartbeat that usually helped her focus. Tonight, however, it only seemed to synchronize with the anxious pounding in her own chest. It was a Friday night in Harborview, and the city's most exclusive nightclub was packed wall to wall with the kind of clientele who spent more on a single bottle of champagne than Mia made in 3 months of double shifts. Mia wiped down the polished mahogany bar, her movements mechanical. Every few seconds, her gaze flickered involuntarily to her phone, which sat face down on the rubber mat near the register. It did not ring, but it buzzed. Again and again. The vibration against the hard surface sounded like an angry hornet, a noise that made her stomach turn over. Evan Blake. She did not need to turn the screen over to know it was him. The pattern was always the same. First came the apologies, long paragraphs about how much he loved her and how he was trying to get better. Then came the questions about where she was, even though he knew perfectly well she was at work. Finally, when she did not answer, the rage would set in. The messages would turn sharp, jagged with accusations and threats that made her breath hitch in her throat. Mia kept her head down, focusing on the cocktail shaker in her hands. She wore a long-sleeved uniform shirt. Despite the heat of the crowded club, the heavy fabric was stifling, but it was necessary. The bruise on her upper arm, shaped like 4 fingers and a thumb, was fading to a sickly yellow, but it was still visible enough to draw questions she did not know how to answer. On her left cheekbone, a thick layer of concealer hid another shadow, a reminder of the night she had finally packed a bag and left him 2 weeks ago. "Hey," a voice said beside her, making her jump. Mia flinched, her shoulder jerking up as if to ward off a blow. A glass slipped from her fingers, shattering against the floor behind the bar. "Whoa, easy," Jasmine said, her eyes wide. Jasmine was a veteran bartender at Lynott, tough as nails and observant in a way Mia tried to avoid. She looked at the broken glass, then back at Mia's pale face. "I did not mean to spook you. Mia, you okay?" Mia forced a smile, crouching down quickly to pick up the shards. Her hands were shaking. "I am fine, just tired. Sorry about the glass." Jasmine did not look convinced. She leaned against the well, watching Mia sweep up the debris. "You've been checking your phone every 30 seconds for the last hour. Is it him again?" "No," Mia lied, the word tasting like ash. "Just spam calls. I am fine. Really?" Jasmine's gaze dropped to the high collar of Mia's shirt, then back to her eyes. She did not press, but the pity in her expression made Mia want to disappear. She did not want pity. She just wanted to survive the night, pay her rent, and figure out how to disappear before Evan decided to stop texting and start looking. The atmosphere in the club shifted abruptly near midnight. It was not a sound. Exactly. The music continued its deep, thumping rhythm, and the laughter of the crowd did not stop. But the air grew heavier, charged with a sudden, electric tension. The bouncers at the front door straightened their spines, their casual vigilance replaced by rigid, military attention. A ripple of quiet moved through the staff, a wave of nervous anticipation that Mia felt on the back of her neck before she even looked up. "He is here," Jasmine murmured, hurriedly wiping a spot on the counter that was already clean. "Who?" Mia asked, dumping the broken glass into the bin. "The owner, Mr. Vitali." Mia frowned. She had worked at Lynott for 6 months and had never seen the owner. She knew the rumors, of course. Everyone in Harborview knew the name Vitali. They owned construction firms, shipping logistics, waste management, and, if the whispers were true, half the politicians and police force in the city. She looked toward the entrance. A group of men moved through the crowd like sharks cutting through a school of fish. People parted for them instinctively, stepping back to create a wide path without fully realizing why they were doing it. At the center of the phalanx walked a man who looked nothing like the rough, loud gangsters from the movies. He was tall, wearing a charcoal suit that fit him with bespoke precision. His dark hair was swept back, revealing a face that was severe and strikingly handsome, composed of sharp angles and a jawline that looked as if it had been carved from granite. He did not look at the crowd. He walked with a terrifying, quiet confidence, his gaze fixed on the VIP section on the mezzanine level. This was Lorenzo Enzo Vitali. Mia felt a strange chill ripple through her. It was not fear, exactly, but a recognition of power. She had spent the last 2 years living with a man who used volume and physical force to assert dominance. Evan was loud, chaotic violence. This man was different. He was silent control. Enzo moved past the bar, and for a split second, his gaze swept over the staff. His eyes were dark, almost black under the club lights, and they missed nothing. He did not stop, continuing up the stairs to the private balcony that overlooked the dance floor, but the air around the bar seemed to relax only after he had vanished from sight. Scary, right? Jasmine whispered, letting out a breath. But he tips the house like you wouldn't believe. Mia turned back to her work, her heart rate slowly returning to normal. As long as he stays up there, I do not care what he does. An hour passed. The club grew louder, the patrons drunker. Mia kept her head down, mixing drink after drink, trying to ignore the buzzing of her phone. She had successfully blocked out the world until a heavy hand slammed onto the bar top in front of her. "Hey, sweetheart," a slur of a voice called out. "I have been waiting 10 minutes. Mia looked up. The man was in his 40s, wearing a suit that was too tight and sweating profusely. His eyes were glassy, swimming with too much vodka. "I apologize, sir," Mia said, her voice practiced and polite. "It is a busy night. What can I get you?" "I want a double bourbon," the man demanded, leaning over the bar. His breath reeked of alcohol and onions. "And I want you to smile. You look like you are at a funeral." Mia reached for the bottle, pouring the drink with steady hands despite the knot of anxiety tightening in her stomach. She slid the glass toward him on a napkin. "Here you go. That will be $20. The man did not reach for the drink. Instead, his hand shot out and clamped around Mia's wrist. She froze. The sensation of his fingers digging into her skin sent a jolt of pure panic through her system. It was not Evan, but the grip felt the same. The possessiveness, the violation of space. "I said smile," the man sneered, his grip tightening. "I am a paying customer. Do not be a bitch. Please let go of me," Mia said, her voice shaking slightly. She tried to pull her hand back, but he held on. Her fingers trembled, the trauma of the last 2 years bubbling up like bile. She knew she should yell. She knew she should grab the bottle and smash it, but her body betrayed her, locking up in a freeze response that she hated. "Sir, you need to release her." Jasmine's voice cut in, sharp and loud, but the man ignored her. "I'm just being friendly." The man laughed, pulling Mia closer. "She likes it, don't you, sweetheart?" From the mezzanine balcony, Enzo Vitali watched. He had been observing the floor, a habit he could never break. He liked to know what was happening in his territory. His eyes had landed on the brunette bartender with the haunted eyes earlier in the night. He had noticed the way she held herself, tight, protected, like someone expecting a blow. He had seen the makeup on her cheek that did not quite match her skin tone. Now, he watched the drunk grab her. He saw the way she went still, like a rabbit caught in the headlights of a truck. He saw the tremble in her hand. Enzo did not shout. He simply lifted one finger. Beside him, his head of security, a massive man named Marco, nodded once and disappeared down the stairs. Down at the bar, the man was still holding Mia's wrist. "Come on, just one smile." A large hand clamped onto the man's shoulder. It was not gentle. "Time to go," Marco said. His voice was deep, rumbling like distant thunder. The drunk man blinked, trying to turn around, but Marco's grip was immovable. "Get your hands off me. Do you know who I am?" "No," Marco said simply. "And I do not care. You are touching the staff. That means you are leaving." Marco didn't wait for an argument. He twisted the man slightly, breaking his grip on Mia's wrist with efficient ease, and began marching him toward the exit. The man shouted protests, stumbling, but he was powerless against the security guard's momentum. Mia stood frozen behind the bar, rubbing her wrist. The red marks of the stranger's fingers were already fading, but the phantom sensation remained. She took a shuddering breath, staring at the empty space where the man had been. "I'm so sorry," she whispered to no one in particular. "I'm so sorry. Why are you apologizing?" The voice was low, smooth, and touched with a dry, dark texture that made the hair on Mia's arms stand up. She looked up. Enzo Vitali was standing at the end of the bar. He was closer than she had realized. Up close, he was even more intimidating. He smelled of expensive tobacco, leather, and something cool and clean, like rain on pavement. His eyes were fixed on her face, studying her with an intensity that made her feel exposed. Mia swallowed hard, her hands clasping together in front of her to hide the shaking. I caused a scene. I should have handled it better." Enzo tilted his head slightly. He looked at her wrist, then back to her eyes. "You did not cause a scene. A drunk animal put his hands on you. That is his fault, not yours." "I just don't want any trouble," Mia murmured, her voice barely audible over the music. She instinctively tried to make herself smaller, hunching her shoulders. "I apologize if it disturbed you. Mr. Vitali." Enzo's eyes narrowed slightly. He had seen that reaction before. He had seen it in people who owed money to the wrong sharks. And he had seen it in dogs that had been kicked too many times. It was the reflex of the abused. "You are far too patient," Enzo said. It wasn't a compliment. It was an observation, delivered with a dry edge, with men who do not deserve it. Mia looked at him, startled. For a moment, the noise of the club faded. She met his gaze, expecting to see judgment or annoyance. Instead, she found a strange, cold clarity. He wasn't looking at her like she was a victim to be pitied, nor like a woman to be conquered. He was looking at her like a puzzle he had just solved. I just do my job," Mia managed to say. She gave a small, wary smile. It was the only defense she had left. Enzo held her gaze for a second longer than was polite. Something in his chest, a jagged, restless thing that rarely settled, went quiet. He nodded once, a sharp dismissal motion, and turned away. "Get back to work," he said, but the bite was gone from his tone. Mia watched him walk away, her heart pounding a different rhythm now. She touched her chest, feeling the strange, heavy warmth his voice had left behind. The shift ended at 3 a.m. Mia changed out of her uniform in the cramped staff locker room. She kept her long sleeves on, pulling a thick hoodie over them despite the mild weather outside. She wanted layers. She wanted armor. She checked her phone one last time. 17 missed calls, 12 texts. The last one had come in an hour ago. "You think you can ignore me? We need to talk." She shoved the phone deep into her bag, her hands trembling again. She just needed to get to her car. Once she was in her car with the doors locked, she would be safe. She would drive to her apartment, lock those doors too, and put a chair under the handle like she had done every night for 2 weeks. She slipped out the back exit of La Notte. The alleyway was narrow, lined with brick walls and overflowing dumpsters. It smelled of wet cardboard and stale beer. The security light above the door flickered, casting long, jumping shadows on the pavement. Mia clutched her keys between her knuckles, a trick Jasmine had taught her, and walked quickly toward her sedan parked at the far end of the alley. "You are hard to get a hold of. Mia!" The voice came from the shadows beside her car. Mia stopped dead. The blood drained from her face, leaving her cold and dizzy. Evan stepped into the pool of dim light. He looked disheveled. His blonde hair was messy, his eyes rimmed with red, and he wore a jacket that looked like he had slept in it. He held a lit cigarette in one hand, the cherry glowing bright orange in the gloom. "Evan," Mia breathed. Her voice was thin, fragile. "What are you doing here?" "I'm waiting for my girlfriend," Evan said, pushing off the car. He took a step toward her. Since she decided to stop answering her phone, "I am not your girlfriend," Mia said, taking a step back. Her heel caught on a crack in the pavement, and she stumbled. "We broke up. Evan, I told you to leave me alone." "You don't mean that," Evan said, his voice dropping to that wheedling, manipulative tone she knew so well. "You are just confused. You are stressed. I know I have a temper, baby, but I am working on it. I just want to talk." "I don't want to talk," Mia said. She was backing away toward the club door, but it was locked from the outside. Panic began to claw at her throat. "Please, just go away." Evan's face twisted. The mask of regret vanished, replaced by the ugly sneer that haunted her nightmares. "You think you are better than me now? Is that it? You get a job at this fancy club, serving drinks to rich pricks, and suddenly I am not good enough?" "It has nothing to do with that," Mia cried out. "It has everything to do with that," Evan shouted. He lunged forward, closing the distance between them. Mia tried to turn and run, but he was too fast. He grabbed her arm, the same arm the customer had grabbed earlier, but Evan's grip was harder. Bruising, he yanked her toward him. "You listen to me," Evan hissed, his face inches from hers. She could smell the sour whiskey on his breath. "You don't get to walk away from me. You are mine. You hear me? You are—" "I believe the lady asked you to leave." The voice was calm. It was not loud. It was barely more than a conversational tone, but it cut through Evan's shouting like a razor through silk. Evan froze, his hand still gripping Mia's arm. He turned his head. Enzo Vitali stood at the back entrance of the club. He had his hands in his trouser pockets. His suit jacket was unbuttoned, revealing a crisp white shirt and a holster that was partially concealed beneath his left arm. Behind him stood Marco and another man, both looking like stone statues waiting for a command to crush something. Evan blinked, squinting in the dim light. He did not know who Enzo was. He just saw a man in a suit interrupting him. "This is a private conversation," Evan spat, puffing up his chest. "Walk away, pal." Mia felt a surge of terror. "Evan, stop," she whispered. "Let go." Enzo did not move. He did not look intimidated. He looked bored. He took a slow step forward, his expensive leather shoes making no sound on the wet pavement. "This alley is private property," Enzo said. His eyes were fixed on Evan's hand, the hand that was still clutching Mia's arm. "And you are trespassing." "I am picking up my girl," Evan sneered. "I don't care about your property." Enzo stopped 5 feet away. The air in the alley seemed to drop 10 degrees. The ice the people whispered about, Mia saw it now. It was in his eyes. They were devoid of any human warmth. They were the eyes of a predator looking at prey that did not yet realize it was dead. "Let her go," Enzo said. It was not a request. Evan hesitated. He was a bully, and bullies were cowards at heart. He looked at Enzo, then at the 2 massive men standing behind him. He looked at the gun bulge under Enzo's arm. The reality of the situation finally penetrated his drunken anger. He released Mia's arm with a shove. Mia stumbled back, hitting the brick wall, gasping for air. "Fine," Evan muttered. Backing away toward the street, he held his hands up in a mock surrender, but his eyes were venomous. He looked at Mia. "This isn't over. Mia, you hear me? You can't hide behind these guys forever." "Get out," Enzo said. Evan turned and walked away, his footsteps echoing as he hurried toward the main street, disappearing into the night. Silence descended on the alley. Mia leaned against the brick wall, her legs shaking so badly she thought she might collapse. She wrapped her arms around herself, trying to hold her shattered composure together. Enzo turned to her. The coldness vanished from his face, replaced by a guarded concern. He stepped closer, but he stopped a respectful distance away, giving her space. "Are you hurt?" he asked. His voice was low, rumbling through the quiet alley. Mia shook her head. She couldn't speak. If she opened her mouth, she was going to sob, and she refused to cry in front of him. I'm fine." The words came out choked, wet. Enzo looked at her. He saw the way she was hugging herself. He saw the glossy sheen of tears in her eyes that she was fighting to hold back. He saw the red marks on her arm where Evan had grabbed her. He knew she wasn't fine, but he didn't push. He didn't demand she explain. He didn't tell her she was weak. "Go home, Miss Carter," Enzo said softly. "Lock your door." Mia nodded, pushing herself off the wall. She fumbled for her car keys, her fingers slippery with sweat. She managed to unlock her car door and opened it, pausing before she got in. She looked back at him. "Thank you," she whispered. Enzo stood in the shadows, a silhouette of dark power against the gray city night. "If anyone harasses my staff again," Enzo said, his voice steady and absolute, They will be handled. You have my word." Mia looked at him, shivering. The way he said handled sounded final. It sounded violent. It should have terrified her. But as she drove away, watching him in her rearview mirror until he disappeared, she realized that, for the first time in 2 years, the fear in her chest was mixed with something else, safety, and that terrified her more than anything. The week that followed the incident in the alley was a blur of exhaustion and low-level terror for Mia Carter. It felt as though the city of Harborview, usually her playground and her prison, had shrunk down to the size of a cage. Her phone, once a lifeline to the world, had transformed into a grenade she carried in her pocket. Evan did not stop. If anything, the confrontation with Enzo seemed to have agitated him, stirring his obsession like a stick in a wasp nest. He sent texts from new numbers every time she blocked the old ones. They oscillated wildly between manic affection and chilling rage. "I am sorry, baby. I was drunk. I just miss you." Then, 2 hours later, "You think you are too good for me. You are nothing without me." Then, "I know what time you get off work." Mia stopped reading them. She would see the notification preview, feel the blood drain from her face, and immediately delete the thread. She considered going to the police, but the memory of her last attempt was a bitter taste in her mouth. She remembered the bored officer behind the desk, the skepticism in his eyes when she showed him the bruises that were not quite dark enough to be felonies, the way he had asked if she had done anything to provoke him. She could not go through that again. She could not handle being told that her fear was not evidence. So, she survived. She worked. She kept her head down. At Lynott, the atmosphere had shifted. The club was still the same pulsing, high-end ecosystem of expensive liquor and beautiful people. But Mia felt a new weight in the air. Enzo Vitali was around more often. Before that night in the alley, she had never seen him. Now, he seemed to be a permanent fixture in the shadows of the mezzanine or sitting at the far end of the bar with a glass of mineral water that he rarely touched. He never hit on her. He never tried to charm her like the other men who slid napkins with phone numbers across the polished mahogany. He simply existed in her periphery, a dark, silent gravity. Mia tried to ignore him, but she could feel his eyes on her. He watched her when she double-checked the locks on the heavy steel door in the kitchen. He watched the way she jumped when a champagne cork popped too loudly near the service station. He noticed how she always positioned herself at the bar so that her back was to the wall and the exit was in her line of sight, a habit she had picked up after too many nights of being cornered in her own kitchen. It was a Tuesday night, typically a slower shift, when the weather turned. A late autumn storm rolled off the harbor, battering the city with sheets of rain and howling winds. The club was half empty, the music dialed down to a low, throbbing lounge tempo. Without warning, the power grid fluctuated. The overhead lights in the club flickered violently, plunged the room into total darkness for 3 seconds, and then surged back on at half brightness. The music cut out with a dying groan. For most people, it was a momentary annoyance. A few patrons laughed nervously. For Mia, it was a time machine. She was instantly back in the apartment she had shared with Evan. She was back in the closet where she used to hide when he came home drunk and smashed the fuse box to terrorize her. The darkness was not just an absence of light, it was a physical weight, pressing against her chest, suffocating her. She dropped the shaker she was holding. It hit the floor with a metallic clang that sounded like a gunshot in the sudden quiet. Mia gripped the edge of the bar, her knuckles turning white. She could not breathe. The air in her lungs felt thin, useless. She squeezed her eyes shut, waiting for the shouting to start, waiting for the sound of Evan's boots on the floorboards. Breathe. The voice was not Evan's. It was low, steady, and anchored in a calm so deep it felt like the floor beneath her feet. Mia opened her eyes. Enzo was standing on the other side of the bar. He was not looking at her with pity. He was looking at her with intense focus, as if he were trying to transmit oxygen to her through sheer will. "Look at me," Enzo commanded softly. "You are at Lynott. The power went out. That is all." Mia stared at him, her chest heaving. She tried to nod, but her neck was stiff. "Come with me," he said. He did not wait for her to argue. He gestured for Jasmine to take over the well, then walked around the bar. He did not touch her. He seemed to understand, instinctively, that touching her right now would shatter her. He simply stood close enough to block the view of the rest of the room, creating a shield with his body. He guided her not to his office, but to a secluded booth in the far corner of the club, away from the prying eyes of the patrons. It was quiet here, the shadows deep and protective. "Sit," he said. Mia sat. Her hands were still trembling, so she tucked them under her thighs to hide them. Enzo sat opposite her, leaning back against the leather banquette. He looked relaxed, which somehow made her feel less frantic. If he wasn't panicking, maybe she didn't need to either. "I'm sorry," Mia whispered, her voice raspy. "I don't know what happened. I'm not usually like this." "You are reacting," Enzo corrected her. "There is a difference." He signaled a server with a subtle nod, and a moment later, a glass of water appeared on the table. Enzo pushed it toward her. "Drink." Mia took a sip, the cold liquid helping to ground her. She set the glass down and looked at him. He was watching her again with that dissecting, intelligent gaze. "The man in the alley," Enzo said. It was not a question. "Has he hurt you before?" Mia stiffened. The instinct to lie, to cover up, to minimize, rose up like a reflex. It was a habit she had honed for 2 years to keep people from worrying, to keep Evan from getting in trouble, to keep herself from feeling the shame of it all. "It was just a messy breakup," Mia said, fixing her eyes on the condensation sliding down the water glass. "He's just emotional. He has a temper, but he gets over it." She looked up, hoping he would buy it. He didn't. Enzo's expression didn't change, but his eyes darkened. He saw the lie. He saw the shame she was trying to hide, and he saw the fear that was practically vibrating off her skin. He looked at the faint yellow bruise still visible on her arm, then back to her face. "I have known men with tempers," Enzo said quietly, "and I know the difference between a man who is emotional and a man who enjoys control." Mia looked away, her throat tight. She felt naked under his scrutiny, peeled back to her rawest nerves. "He won't stop texting me," she admitted, the words slipping out before she could stop them. "He calls from different numbers. He says he wants to talk, but I know he just wants to yell. I just want it to be over." Enzo nodded slowly. He did not offer empty platitudes. He did not tell her it would be okay. "If he touches you again," Enzo said, his voice dropping an octave, becoming something hard and heavy, "I want to know immediately." "I can handle it," Mia said, though her voice lacked conviction. "You are strong, Mia," Enzo said. The use of her first name surprised her. It sounded different coming from him, not casual, but deliberate. "But you do not have to fight a war alone just to prove you can—" The conversation shifted after that, steered gently by Enzo away from the darkness. He asked her about the sketchbook he had seen sticking out of her bag once. "Oh," Mia said, a flush of color returning to her pale cheeks. "That is nothing. Just ideas." "Tell me," he insisted. "I wanted to study interior design," she said, a shy smile touching her lips. Before everything got complicated, I have this dream of opening a cafe, not a bar, somewhere bright, high ceilings, lots of plants, really good coffee, a place where people can actually hear each other talk." As she spoke, her face lit up. The haunted look in her eyes receded, replaced by a spark of passion that transformed her. Enzo watched her, captivated. He saw the woman she was beneath the trauma, creative, hopeful, vibrant. "You have an eye for detail," Enzo observed. "I have seen the way you arrange the garnishes. You care about aesthetics. My mother used to say I was too picky." Mia laughed softly. "She said I wanted the world to be prettier than it actually is." "There is no sin in that," Enzo said. He paused, turning the heavy gold ring on his pinky finger. "My mother was an immigrant. She came here with nothing but 2 suitcases and 3 children. She worked in a textile factory for 12 hours a day, every day, for 20 years. Mia watched him, surprised. It was rare for a man like him, a man who radiated such impenetrable authority, to speak of something so personal. She scrubbed floors on the weekends. Enzo continued, his gaze distant. Her hands were always rough, calloused, but she kept our house spotless. She put fresh flowers on the table every Sunday, even if she had to steal them from the park. She wanted us to know that just because we were poor, it did not mean we had to live in ugliness. He looked back at Mia. She did it to keep us safe, he said, to build a wall between us and the dirt of the world. I think you understand that. Mia felt a lump form in her throat. She looked at this man, this dangerous, feared man, and saw a depth of loyalty that took her breath away. She sounds amazing, Mia whispered. She was, Enzo said. She would have liked you. The comment hung in the air between them, charged and terrifyingly intimate. Mia felt a flush of heat rise up her neck. Not from embarrassment, but from a sudden, sharp awareness of him as a man. 2 nights later, the tenuous peace shattered. It was closing time on a Friday. The rain had returned with a vengeance, hammering against the roof of Lanotte like stones. The staff was cleaning up, flipping chairs onto tables. Mia was counting out her drawer, her mind focused on the math. When her phone buzzed in her apron pocket, she pulled it out, expecting a text from her landlord. It was a new number. I know you are closing up. I am waiting by your building. We are finishing this conversation tonight. The blood drained from Mia's face so fast it left her dizzy. The phone almost slipped from her fingers. Waiting by her building. He was there, at her home, her sanctuary, the one place she had left. She stood frozen, staring at the screen, her breath coming in short, shallow gasps. Mia? She didn't hear him approach. Enzo was suddenly there, standing on the other side of the register. He saw the paper-white pallor of her skin. He saw the way her hand was shaking so violently the phone was blurring. He didn't ask what was wrong. He reached out and gently took the phone from her hand. Mia didn't fight him. She couldn't move. Enzo read the text. His expression did not change, but his jaw tightened until a muscle feathered in his cheek. He looked at the timestamp. 1 minute ago. He looked up at her, capturing her gaze with intense gravity. Get your coat, he said. I can't go home. Mia stammered, panic rising in her chest. He is there. He is going to be there. You are going home, Enzo said, his voice hard steel wrapped in velvet. But you are not going alone. I can't drag you into this, she whispered. He is crazy. Enzo. Get your coat, he repeated, softer this time, but with no room for argument. My driver is out back. Mia hesitated. She knew who Enzo was. She had heard the whispers in the break room. Mafia. Organized crime. Dangerous. Getting into a car with him was crossing a line. It was entering his world. But then she thought of Evan standing in the rain outside her apartment building. His fists clenched, his anger simmering. The fear of Evan was a sharp, known blade. The fear of Enzo was a dull, heavy weight. She chose the weight. 5 minutes later, she was sitting in the back of a black Maybach sedan. The interior smelled of expensive leather and silence. The rain drummed against the tinted windows, sealing them in a private, dark capsule. Enzo sat beside her. There was enough space between them that they weren't touching. But the air between them was electric. Mia could feel the heat radiating from his suit. She was shivering, the adrenaline crash leaving her cold. Turn the heat up, Enzo ordered the driver, his voice low. Yes, boss. Enzo shifted slightly, angling his body toward her. Marco is already at your building. He's checking the perimeter. You sent security? Mia asked, her voice small. I sent my best, Enzo corrected. They sat in silence as the car glided through the wet streets of Harborview. Mia stared out the window at the blurred city lights. She felt small. She felt broken. I'm sorry, she said, her voice breaking. I feel so stupid. I am a grown woman and I need a bodyguard just to go home. You are not stupid, Enzo said. He reached out, his hand hovering for a moment before he placed it gently on the seat between them, close enough that his pinky finger brushed the fabric of her coat. You are being hunted. There is no shame in needing a shield. The car pulled up to the curb in front of her apartment complex. It was an older brick building, respectable but worn. The driver's phone buzzed. He answered it, listened for a second, then looked in the rearview mirror. Marco says the street is clear. Boss, no sign of the subject. Mia let out a breath she didn't know she had been holding. He's gone, or he is hiding, Enzo said. He opened his door. I am walking you up. You don't have to. I am walking you up. They walked into the lobby. The building was quiet. Mia's hands shook as she pressed the button for the elevator. Enzo stood beside her, his body angled to shield her from the entrance. He scanned the lobby, his eyes sharp, missing nothing. They rode the elevator to the 4th floor in silence. When the doors opened, the hallway was empty. Mia walked to her door, apartment 4B. She fished her keys out of her bag, the metal jingling loudly in the quiet corridor. Wait, Enzo said. He stepped in front of her, placing a hand on her shoulder to move her back. He looked at the door frame. It looked intact. He looked at the lock. It didn't look tampered with. He nodded to her. Open it. Mia unlocked the door and pushed it open. She stepped inside, reaching for the light switch. See, it is fine. I was just... She flipped the switch. The light flooded the small living room. Mia gasped, her hands flying to her mouth. The apartment had been violated. It wasn't tossed. It wasn't destroyed in a rage. It was subtle, which made it worse. A picture frame that had been sitting on the entry table, a photo of Mia and her sister, was lying face down on the floor. The glass shattered. The lamp by the sofa was tipped over, the shade crushed. And in the center of the coffee table, a single red rose lay on top of a piece of paper. Mia's knees buckled. The room spun. He had been inside. He had been here, in her space, touching her things, breathing her air. The violation felt physical, like a hand around her throat. She stumbled, grabbing the doorframe for support. He was here. Oh God, he was here. Enzo moved instantly. He stepped into the apartment, his movement fluid and lethal. He didn't look at the broken picture. He scanned the room, checking the corners, checking the shadows. He moved to the bedroom, disappearing for 10 seconds, then the bathroom, then the kitchen. He came back to the living room. He's gone. Mia was sliding down the wall, clutching her chest. He has a key. I took his key back, but he must have made a copy. He was waiting for me. She was hyperventilating now. The panic was a tidal wave, drowning her. She couldn't stay here. She couldn't sleep here. Enzo crossed the room in 2 strides. He crouched down in front of her, his expensive suit straining at the knees. He took her face in his hands. His palms were warm, rough, and solid. Mia, he said. His voice was not loud, but it cut through the noise in her head like a blade. Look at me. She focused on his eyes. They were dark, furious, and terrifyingly calm. He's not getting back in, Enzo said. I am going to have the locks changed within the hour. Marco will stand outside your door all night. Do you understand? Mia nodded jerkily, tears spilling over her lashes. He's never going to stop. He's going to kill me. Enzo. One day he's just going to do it. Enzo's jaw tightened until the tendons stood out in his neck. A darkness passed over his face, a cold, ancient anger that had nothing to do with business and everything to do with the trembling woman in his hands. He used his thumbs to wipe the tears from her cheeks. The gesture was shockingly tender, at odds with the violence in his eyes. No, Enzo said. The word was a vow. He has crossed a line tonight. He has entered my protection. He stood up, pulling her up with him. He steadied her on her feet, his hands lingering on her arms. He will not be allowed near you again, Enzo said. Mia looked at him. She saw the steel in his spine. She saw the deadly seriousness of his promise. Part of her, the civilized part, was terrified of what not allowed meant in the vocabulary of a mafia boss. It meant blood. It meant disappearance. But the other part of her, the part that had been living in fear for 2 years, the part that was exhausted and broken and scared, felt a wave of relief so potent it almost brought her to her knees again. Okay, she whispered. Enzo looked at the broken picture frame on the floor. He stepped on a shard of glass, crushing it into dust beneath his heel. Nobody touches what is mine, he murmured. almost to himself. Mia looked up sharply, but he had already turned away, pulling his phone from his pocket to make a call that would change everything. The city of Harborview had a way of shifting shapes depending on who was watching it. For Mia Carter, the city had transformed over the last week from a labyrinth of potential threats into a fortress where the walls had eyes. Enzo Vitali had not spoken a word to her about the details of his promise, but the evidence of his protection was woven into the fabric of her daily life. It started with the small things. A black sedan with tinted windows was parked across the street from her apartment building every morning when she left for her day job at the cafe. It was never the same car 2 days in a row, but the drivers all shared the same silhouette: broad shoulders, stillness, and eyes that tracked her movement without ever making direct contact. Then there was the new doorman at her apartment complex. The old management had never hired security. The front door lock had been broken for 3 years. But suddenly, a man named Arthur was stationed in the lobby from dusk until dawn. He was an older man with a thick neck and knuckles that looked like they had seen more than a few fights, though he wore a polite smile and a uniform that was slightly too tight across the chest. "New management policy, Miss Carter," Arthur had said when she asked him about it, tipping his cap. "Just want to make sure the residents feel secure." Mia knew it was a lie. She knew whose payroll Arthur was really on. But when she walked through the lobby late at night, the heavy glass door locking with a reassuring click behind her, she could not bring herself to resent the intrusion. At La Notte, the changes were even more subtle. A new high-definition security camera had appeared in the back alley, its red light blinking a steady, unsleeping rhythm in the darkness. When Mia took the trash out, one of the bouncers, a man she had barely spoken to in 6 months, would silently drift away from the back door to stand at the edge of the alley until she was finished. It was an invisible shield. It was suffocating in its thoroughness. Yet it was the only thing holding her panic at bay. She felt half comforted by the knowledge that Enzo's reach was so long, and half unnerved by the realization that she was now moving within that reach. She was a civilian walking through a minefield, guided by the man who had planted the explosives. However, the shield could not block out everything. Evan Blake was growing desperate. The texts had stopped being aggressive and had become erratic. They were the ramblings of a man who was cornered. He stopped threatening her directly and started sending cryptic messages about time running out, about debts that could not be paid, and about how everything falling apart was her fault. Mia tried to focus on her work. She had picked up shifts at the Daily Grind, a coffee shop 3 blocks from her apartment, trying to save enough money to potentially move out of the city if things got worse. The cafe was the opposite of La Notte, bright, smelling of roasted beans and vanilla, filled with the chatter of students and office workers. It was Tuesday afternoon, during the lunch rush, when the illusion of safety shattered. Mia was on her break, taking out the recycling to the bins in the narrow service corridor behind the shop. The sun was high and bright, casting sharp shadows against the brick walls. She tossed a bundle of cardboard into the dumpster and turned to go back inside. Evan was standing there. He looked terrible. He had lost weight, his cheekbones hollow and his skin possessing a gray, clammy sheen. He hadn't shaved in days, and his eyes were darting around the alleyway with a manic energy that made Mia's stomach drop. "Evan," Mia breathed, stepping back until her spine hit the warm brick wall. "You can't be here." "I have been watching," Evan said, his voice cracking. He took a step toward her, twitching. "I saw the car outside your place. I saw the goon in the lobby. You think you are special now? You think you are safe because you are spreading your legs for some gangster?" "Stop it," Mia said, her voice shaking but loud. "I am not doing anything. You need to leave before I call the police." "The police?" Evan let out a harsh, barking laugh. "The police don't care about us, Mia, and they definitely don't care about me. Do you know who I owe money to? Do you have any idea what you have done to me?" "I haven't done anything to you," Mia argued, her hands balling into fists at her sides. "You did this to yourself. Evan, you gambled. You drank. I just left." "You made me desperate," Evan shouted, the sound echoing off the brick. "I needed money to pay them off, And you left me. Now they are calling in the markers. They said if I don't pay by Friday, they are going to break my legs. Or worse." He lunged at her. It happened so fast, Mia barely had time to gasp. Evan slammed her back against the brick wall, knocking the wind out of her. His hand clamped around her left wrist, squeezing with a strength born of pure adrenaline and fear. "You are going to help me," Evan hissed, his face inches from hers. Spittle flew from his lips. "You are close to Vitaly now. I know you are. You are going to get me money. You are going to tell him to back off the interest. You are going to fix this." "Let go of me," Mia screamed, struggling against his grip. Pain shot up her arm. "I don't have any money. I don't know what you're talking about." "Liar!" Evan raised his other hand, not a fist, but an open palm, poised to strike. "Don't you lie to me!" "Hey!" The shout came from the mouth of the alley. A man in a plain gray hoodie, who'd been leaning against a lamppost quietly reading a newspaper a moment before, was now sprinting toward them. He moved with a speed and fluidity that screamed military training. Evan panicked. He looked at the approaching man, then back at Mia. His courage evaporated instantly. He shoved Mia hard, sending her stumbling sideways, and released her wrist. "This isn't over," Evan yelled over his shoulder as he bolted toward the opposite end of the alley, scrambling over a chain-link fence and disappearing into the next street. The man in the gray hoodie slowed down as he reached Mia, not bothering to chase Evan. His priority was clear. "Miss Carter," the man said, his voice calm and professional. He didn't look like a hero. He looked like a soldier. "Are you injured?" Mia clutched her wrist against her chest. Her heart was hammering so hard she thought it might bruise her ribs. She looked at the man. She recognized him vaguely. He was the one who had been at the bus stop yesterday. I'm okay," Mia gasped, though her knees felt like water. He just... "We saw him," the man said, reaching for an earpiece cord tucked into his collar. "I will report the contact. Please go back inside, Miss Carter. Stay away from the windows." Mia nodded numbly. She turned and fled back into the safety of the coffee shop, the bright sunlight suddenly feeling cold on her skin. By the time her shift at Lynott began that evening, the adrenaline had worn off, leaving behind a deep, aching exhaustion. Mia moved through the motions of setting up the bar, but her hands were clumsy. She dropped a lime wedge. She poured too much tonic into a glass. Every time the door opened, she flinched, expecting to see Evan's desperate, wild face. Midway through the night, she couldn't take it anymore. She asked Jasmine to cover for her and slipped away to the staff restroom in the back corridor. It was a small, single-occupancy room with black tiles and a sleek, modern vanity. Mia locked the door, or thought she did, and leaned over the sink. She turned on the cold water and splashed her face, trying to wash away the feeling of Evan's breath on her skin. She looked at herself in the mirror. She looked haunted. Dark circles bruised the skin under her eyes. She rolled up the sleeve of her uniform shirt. There, on her left wrist, directly over the pulse point, was a fresh, angry red mark in the shape of a handprint. It was already darkening to purple at the edges. A sob clawed its way up her throat. She clamped a hand over her mouth to stifle it, but the dam broke. The tears came hot and fast, burning her eyes. It was too much. The constant vigilance, the fear, the shame of being dragged into Evan's mess. It was crushing her. She reached for her makeup bag, her fingers shaking as she pulled out a tube of heavy-duty concealer. She dabbed it onto her wrist, trying to hide the mark, trying to erase the evidence of her own vulnerability. "Stupid," she whispered to her reflection, her voice trembling. "So stupid." The door behind her clicked open. Mia spun around, gasping, hiding her wrist behind her back. She had not turned the lock all the way. Enzo Vitali stood in the doorway. He was wearing a black dress shirt with the top 2 buttons undone, his suit jacket absent. He looked imposing in the small space, filling the doorway with his dark presence. He'd been coming to check on something in the supply closet next door when he heard the muffled sound of crying. Enzo's eyes swept over her. He saw the wet lashes. He saw the concealer tube clutched in her hand. and then his gaze dropped to her arm, which she was trying unsuccessfully to hide. "Let me see," Enzo said. His voice was low, devoid of the command he used with his men. It was quiet, almost gentle. "It is nothing," Mia sniffled, backing up until her hips hit the sink. "I am just having a moment. I will be back on the floor in a minute." Enzo stepped into the room and closed the door behind him. The click of the lock was loud in the tiled space. He walked toward her, slow and deliberate. "Mia," he said, "let me see." He reached out. He did not grab her. He held his hand palm up, waiting. It was an offer, not a demand. Mia hesitated, her breath hitched in her chest. Slowly, agonizingly, she brought her left arm out from behind her back. Enzo looked at her wrist. He saw the angry red welts where Evan's fingers had dug in. He saw the smear of beige makeup trying to cover the violence. Something inside Enzo snapped. It was not a loud break. It was a silent fracture in the wall of ice he kept around his emotions. He felt a surge of rage so pure and white-hot that he had to physically restrain himself from punching the tiled wall. But he pushed the violence down, burying it deep where it could fuel him later. Right now, she did not need his rage. She needed his control. "He found you at the cafe," Enzo said. It wasn't a question. His network had already informed him of the incident, but seeing the mark was different. It made it real. "I'm sorry," Mia whispered, tears spilling over again. "I didn't mean for this to happen. I tried to cover it up. I don't want to be a problem for you." Enzo looked up from her wrist to her eyes. "You think you are a problem?" "I am a mess," Mia cried softly. "He is crazy. Enzo, he owes money to people. Bad people. He thinks I can help him. I can't breathe. Every time I turn around, he is there." Enzo stepped closer. He was inside her personal space now, close enough that she could smell the sandalwood and expensive whiskey that clung to him. "You do not have to explain anything," Enzo said, his voice uncharacteristically soft. He raised his hands and gently, terrified of breaking her, cupped her face. His thumbs brushed away the tears tracking down her cheeks. "Stop apologizing for surviving. I am tired," Mia confessed, her voice barely a whisper. She leaned into his touch instinctively, her eyes fluttering shut. "I'm so tired of being afraid." "I know," Enzo murmured. "Let me handle it. Just let go. Mia, I have you." Emotion surged between them, thick and heavy in the small room. Mia opened her eyes. Enzo was looking at her not as a boss, not as a protector, but as a man who was starving. He searched her gaze, looking for any sign of fear of him. He found none. He found only exhaustion and a desperate, naked longing. "Enzo," she breathed. He hesitated for a heartbeat, giving her one last chance to pull away. When she didn't, when she tilted her chin up just a fraction, he closed the distance. He kissed her. It was not a movie kiss. It was slow, intense, and careful. Enzo's lips were firm against hers, tasting of control and restraint. He moved as if she were made of glass, his hands sliding from her face to the back of her neck, his fingers tangling in her hair to support her. Mia let out a small, broken sound against his mouth and melted. The tension that had been holding her spine straight for weeks collapsed. She fisted her hands in his shirt, pulling him closer, clinging to him like he was the only solid thing in a world that was spinning off its axis. The kiss deepened. Enzo groaned low in his throat, a vibration she felt in her own chest. He tilted her head back, deepening the angle, his thumb stroking the sensitive skin behind her ear. It was possessive, yes, but it was also reverent. It was the touch of a man who knew the value of what he was holding. For Mia, the kiss was a revelation. It wasn't pain. It wasn't taking. It was giving. It was a transfer of strength. Her heart raced, not from the panic of being hunted, but from the sudden, overwhelming realization that she was wanted. They broke apart, breathless, their foreheads resting against each other. Mia's lips were swollen, her eyes wide and dazed. She stared at his chest, watching the rise and fall of his breathing. Shame pricked at her. Shame for how easily she had given in, for how much she had wanted it. Mia started, her voice trembling. "I shouldn't have done that. You are my boss. This is complicated," Enzo finished for her. He did not pull away. He kept his hands on her shoulders, grounding her. "Yes, it is." "You are dangerous," Mia whispered. "I know what you are. Enzo, I know what you do." "I am not a good man," Enzo admitted. His voice was gravel, rough with honesty. "I have done things that would make you nightmares. I do not pretend to be a saint." He lifted her chin so she had to look him in the eye. "But I will never hurt you," he vowed. "I will burn this city to ash before I let anyone hurt you, including me." "I don't know if I can handle more complications," Mia said, a fresh tear sliding down her nose. "Evan is still out there. He's never going to stop." "Evan is a mistake that is about to be corrected," Enzo said darkly. Before Mia could ask what that meant, a sharp knock sounded on the door. "Boss," a deep voice called from the hallway. It was Marco. "Urgent." Enzo closed his eyes for a second, the mask of the Mafia Don sliding back into place. He stepped back from Mia, smoothing his shirt, though his eyes lingered on her lips. "Stay here for a minute," Enzo told her. "Fix your makeup. Go home. I will have the car waiting." He opened the door and stepped out into the hallway, leaving Mia alone with the echo of her own heartbeat. In the corridor, Marco was waiting. His face was grim. "What is it?" Enzo asked, his voice instantly cold, the tenderness of the bathroom gone. "We got a hit on Blake," Marco said, keeping his voice low so the staff wouldn't hear. "One of our informants in the Heights just called in. Blake has been making rounds." "Trying to borrow more money?" Enzo asked, walking toward his office. "Trying to sell," Marco corrected. "He's approaching the Sartori crew." Enzo stopped walking. The Sartori family were rivals. They had been trying to get a foothold in Harborview's nightlife for years. "What is he selling?" Enzo asked, his voice dangerous. "Information," Marco said. "He's telling them he knows how we move product through the club. He's telling them he can get them inside. He's using Miss Carter as leverage, boss. He's telling them she is his way in, that she can open the back doors." Enzo stared at the wall, his mind moving like a chess grandmaster. Evan Blake wasn't just an abusive ex-boyfriend anymore. He was a security leak. He was an active threat to the Vitali organization. He was trying to sell Mia out to pay his gambling debts, positioning her as a co-conspirator in a war she didn't even know existed. If the Sartoris believed Evan, they would come for Mia. They would use her to get to Enzo. She was no longer just a civilian. She was a pawn on the board. Enzo realized with a sinking feeling that he had let this go on too long. He had tried to handle Evan with kid gloves to spare Mia the trauma of violence. He had tried to be subtle. Subtlety was over. "He's trying to trade her safety for his debt," Enzo said quietly. The thought made his blood run cold. "What are the orders?" Marco asked. "Do we clip him?" Enzo considered it. It would be easy. A bullet in the dark. A body in the harbor. The problem would vanish. But then he thought of Mia in the bathroom. He thought of her trembling hands and her confession that she was tired of fear. If he killed Evan, Mia would know. She would know Enzo had done it, and she would spend the rest of her life wondering if the man she kissed was a monster. It would destroy her agency. It would make her a permanent victim, saved only by a greater violence. He couldn't do that to her. He had to be smarter. "No," Enzo said. "No killing. Not yet." He turned to Marco, his eyes hard as diamonds. "He wants to make a deal?" Enzo said. "Fine. We're going to give him a deal. Set up a meeting, but not with the Sartoris. He's going to meet with us." "He won't come to us," Marco noted. "He will," Enzo said, "because we are going to make him an offer he thinks will save his life. We are going to neutralize him. Marco. And we are going to do it in a way that ensures he never steps foot in Harborview again." Enzo looked back toward the bathroom door where Mia was hiding. "She needs to see it," Enzo murmured to himself. "She needs to see him lose, not die, lose." "Boss?" Marco asked, confused. "Get the car," Enzo ordered, walking toward his office. "We have a rat to catch." The Sapphire Lounge was an exclusive enclave connected to Lanaut by a single, reinforced, soundproof door. While the main club throbbed with the chaotic energy of bass and bodies, The lounge was a sanctuary of quiet menace, decorated in deep blues and velvet, smelling of aged scotch and old money. It was here that Enzo Vitali sat, waiting. He checked his watch. The Rolex on his wrist was worth more than Evan Blake had likely earned in his entire life. It was 11 o'clock at night. The meeting was set for 5 minutes past. "He is here," Marco said, his voice coming through the small earpiece Enzo wore. "He is sweating. Boss, he looks like a cornered rat." "Send him in," Enzo said. His voice was calm, devoid of the simmering rage that had been living in his chest since he saw the bruise on Mia's arm 2 days ago. Tonight was not about rage. It was about business. It was about surgical removal. Enzo poured himself a glass of water. He did not drink alcohol when he was working, and despite the relaxed setting, this was work. He needed Evan Blake gone, not dead. Death brought police, investigations, and questions Mia would eventually ask, but gone, erased from the map of Harborview. The door opened. Evan Blake walked in. He tried to swagger, rolling his shoulders in a cheap leather jacket that squeaked when he moved, but the tremor in his hands gave him away. He looked around the opulent room, his eyes darting from the heavy curtains to the 2 silent guards standing by the wall, finally landing on Enzo. Enzo did not stand. He remained seated at the small, round marble table in the center of the room, his posture relaxed, his legs crossed. He gestured to the empty chair opposite him. "Sit," Enzo said. Evan hesitated, then pulled the chair out loudly, scraping the legs against the floor in a petty display of defiance. He sat down, leaning forward, trying to invade Enzo's space. "So," Evan said, his voice a little too loud for the quiet room, "the big man finally wants to talk. I figured you would come around eventually." Enzo looked at him. He saw the dilated pupils, the sheen of sweat on his upper lip, the frantic energy of a gambling addict who was in over his head. "We are here to discuss your outstanding obligations," Enzo said smoothly. He placed a single folder on the table. "You owe $45,000 to the East Side bookies. You owe another 15 to a loan shark in the docks. And you are currently trying to sell information to the Sartori family to cover the interest." Evan's face paled slightly, but he quickly covered it with a sneer. "I am a businessman. I explore my options." "You are a drowning man grabbing at anchors," Enzo corrected him. He opened the folder. Inside was a cashier's check. "This is a check for $60,000. It covers every cent you owe to every dangerous person in this city." Evan stared at the check. Greed flared in his eyes, naked and ugly. He reached for it, but Enzo placed his hand over the paper. "There are conditions," Enzo said. "What conditions?" Evan asked, his eyes still glued to the money. "You take this money, you pay your debts, and then you leave Harborview," Enzo said. His tone was conversational, as if he were discussing the weather. "You move at least 3 states away. You never contact Mia Carter again. Not a text. Not a call, not a letter. You forget she exists." Evan leaned back, a smirk twisting his lips. The fear was receding, replaced by the arrogance of a man who realized he had leverage. "That is a lot of money just to get rid of an ex-boyfriend," Evan said, letting out a laugh that sounded like dry leaves crunching. "She must be good in bed. Is that it? You paying for exclusive rights?" Enzo did not flinch. He did not blink. He simply stared at Evan until the laughter died in the younger man's throat. "I am paying for peace," Enzo said. "Take the deal. Evan, it is the only one you will get." Downstairs, in the main club, Mia was running on autopilot. The club was at capacity. The air was hot and thick with perfume and sweat. Mia moved behind the bar, pouring shots, mixing cocktails, smiling when customers shouted orders at her. She was exhausted. Every time the door opened, her heart hammered against her ribs, expecting to see Evan. She needed more ice. "I will be right back," she told Jasmine, grabbing the empty ice bucket. She headed toward the service corridor that ran behind the VIP booths. It was a shortcut to the large ice machines in the back. As she passed the side entrance, a door reserved for deliveries and high-level associates, it opened. Mia froze, pressing herself into the shadows of the hallway. Evan walked in. He was flanked by 2 of Lanot's security guards, but he wasn't in handcuffs. He was walking freely, Looking nervous but determined, they were leading him toward the private staircase that led up to the Sapphire Lounge. Panic, cold and sharp, spiked in Mia's chest. Why was Evan here? Why was security letting him in? "Take him up to Mr. Vitali," one of the guards muttered. "He's expecting him." Mia's blood ran cold. Enzo. Evan was meeting Enzo. 1,000 terrible scenarios flashed through her mind. Was Enzo paying him off? Was Evan hurting Enzo? Was this a trap? She remembered Evan's threats about the rival gangs, about how he knew people. If Enzo got hurt because of her, because she had dragged her messy, violent past into his life, she would never forgive herself. She couldn't just stand there. She dropped the ice bucket. It hit the floor with a clatter, but the music from the club drowned it out. She waited until the guards and Evan had disappeared up the stairs. Then she followed. She knew the layout of the club better than the customers. She knew there was a service balcony that overlooked the Sapphire Lounge, used by the lighting technicians to adjust the ambiance. If she was quiet, she could see what was happening. She slipped off her shoes, moving silently in her socks up the narrow maintenance, metal staircase. Her breath came in shallow gasps. She reached the top, crouching low behind the velvet railing. Below her, in the center of the room, she saw them. Enzo sat like a king, still and composed. Evan sat opposite him, looking agitated. Mia pressed her hand over her mouth to stifle the sound of her own breathing. She watched, her heart breaking, as her past and her present collided. "You think you can buy me off?" Evan was saying, his voice echoing slightly in the high-ceilinged room. He leaned forward, resting his elbows on the table. "You think 60 grand is enough? I know things, Vitali. I know about the shipments that come in through the back. I know about the police payroll." "You know rumors," Enzo said dismissively, "and you are overplaying your hand." "Am I?" Evan challenged. "The Sartoris were very interested in what I had to say. They offered me more than money. They offered me a position. Respect." "They offered you a grave," Enzo said. "They will use you and then bury you to keep you quiet. I am offering you a life. I don't want your charity," Evan snapped, slamming his hand on the table. "And I don't want to leave. Why should I leave? Because you want my girl?" Mia flinched in the darkness of the balcony. "My girl." The possessiveness in his voice made her skin crawl. "She's not your girl," Enzo said. His voice dropped. Losing its conversational lightness, it became heavier, darker. "She left you." "She didn't leave me," Evan scoffed. He waved a dismissive hand. "She throws fits. She runs away for attention. She always does this. She acts like a victim, crying about how I treat her. But she loves it. She needs it." Up on the balcony, tears began to track silently down Mia's face. To hear him twist her trauma, to hear him rewrite her pain as a game she was playing, was a knife in her gut. She felt exposed, stripped naked in front of Enzo. She wanted to scream, to defend herself, but fear glued her tongue to the roof of her mouth. Enzo's face remained impassive, but his hand, resting on the table, slowly curled into a fist. The knuckles turned white. "She seemed quite terrified of you in the alley," Enzo noted. "That is just an act," Evan sneered. "She knows how to play men. She plays the scared little bird, and guys like you fall for it. You think you are saving her? Please. You are just the latest mark. She is damaged goods. Man, broken entertainment. Once you get bored of the crying act, you will see." The air in the room seemed to vanish. The temperature plummeted. Enzo stared at Evan. Every word Evan spoke was a nail in his own coffin, but he was too stupid to see the hammer coming down. "She always comes back," Evan bragged, leaning back in his chair, a smug grin plastering his face. "I break her down and she comes crawling back. She knows where she belongs. She belongs to me. No." The word was not loud, but it stopped the room dead. Enzo stood up. He did not stand quickly. He unfolded himself from the chair with a slow, predatory grace that was far more terrifying than sudden movement. He loomed over the table, his shadow stretching across Evan's face. "She does not belong to anyone," Enzo said, His voice was a low growl, vibrating with a violence that was barely contained. And she certainly does not belong to a man who bruises what he claims to love. Evan blinked, his bravado faltering for the first time. He sensed the shift. He realized, too late, that he was not talking to a businessman anymore. He was talking to a monster. You are just using her," Evan stammered, trying to regain his footing. "You're just another thug." Evan reached for his glass of whiskey, his hand shaking, trying to take a drink to calm his nerves. He slammed the glass down on the table, trying to punctuate his toughness. "I am not leaving," Evan declared, his voice cracking. "And neither is she." Enzo moved. It was a blur. One moment Enzo was standing, the next he had lunged across the table. His hand shot out, a blur of motion, and clamped around Evan's right wrist. "Hey!" Evan shouted, trying to pull back. He couldn't. Enzo's grip was iron. It was absolute. Enzo slammed Evan's hand down flat against the marble tabletop. The sound of flesh hitting stone cracked through the room like a whip. He pinned Evan's wrist there, leaning his weight into it, trapping the hand that had struck Mia so many times. "Let go!" Evan yelled, panic finally taking over. He scrambled in his chair, but Enzo didn't budge. Enzo leaned in close, his face inches from Evan's. His eyes were black pits of fury. "Listen to me very carefully," Enzo whispered, "because I am only going to say this once." Up on the balcony, Mia pressed her hands to the railing, her knuckles white. She was terrified. She'd never seen violence like this. Controlled, precise, dominant. Enzo wasn't hitting him. He was overpowering him. And yet, beneath the terror, a fierce, hot wave of gratitude washed over her. For 2 years, people had told her to work it out. They had told her she was exaggerating. They had told her it takes two to make a fight. Enzo didn't tell her anything. He just stood between her and the monster. "You will never speak her name again," Enzo warned, his voice vibrating with lethal intent. "You will not look for her. You will not think about her. If you so much as breathe in her direction, I will not be sending you a check. I will be sending you in pieces to the bottom of the Atlantic." Enzo pressed down harder. He didn't crush the bones, not yet. He applied just enough pressure to strain the tendons, to make the joints scream, to show Evan exactly how fragile he was. Evan whimpered, his face contorted in pain. Okay, let go." Enzo held him there for 5 more seconds, letting the pain sear into Evan's memory. He wanted Evan to remember this moment every time he thought about raising his hand to a woman. Then, Enzo released him. He stepped back, straightening his suit jacket with a sharp tug. He looked at Evan with pure disgust. "You have 48 hours, Enzo said coldly. "If you are still in Harborview on Sunday morning, the offer expires, and so do you." Evan cradled his hand against his chest, gasping. He looked small. He looked pathetic. The arrogance was gone, replaced by the raw terror of a prey animal that had just escaped the jaws of a lion. "Get him out of my sight." Enzo ordered the guards. The 2 security men stepped forward, hauling Evan out of the chair. They didn't drag him gently. They grabbed him by the arms and marched him toward the door. As they dragged him past the threshold, Evan looked up. His gaze caught movement in the shadows of the balcony. He squinted. Mia was there, frozen, looking down, their eyes locked. For a second, time stopped. Mia saw the hatred burning in Evan's eyes, a toxic mix of humiliation and rage. He knew she had seen him beg. He knew she had seen him broken. He didn't mouth anything. He didn't scream. But the look promised retribution. It promised that this wasn't over. Then the door slammed shut, severing the connection. Mia sank down to the floor of the balcony, hugging her knees to her chest. She was shaking uncontrollably. She had wanted to be safe. She had wanted to be free. But as she sat in the dark, listening to the silence of the lounge below, she realized she hadn't just freed herself. She had started a war. Enzo stood alone in the center of the room. He stared at the empty chair where Evan had sat. He picked up the glass Evan had slammed down, looked at it for a moment, and then dropped it into the trash bin. He ran a hand through his hair, letting out a long, heavy breath. He looked tired. Mia watched him through the slats of the railing. She saw the man behind the monster. She saw the burden he was carrying for her. She blamed herself. She had dragged him into this mud. She had made him a target for the Sartoris, for the police, for Evan's madness. "I am so sorry," she whispered into the darkness, though he couldn't hear her. Enzo walked to the window, looking out at the city lights. He didn't know she was there, and he thought he was alone, but he wasn't alone. And for the first time, Mia realized that neither was she. The door to the Sapphire Lounge clicked shut, sealing the tension inside, but the aftershocks rippled out into the hallway where Mia Carter stood waiting. Her heart was a frantic bird battering against her ribcage. She had seen everything from the balcony. She had seen the way Enzo Vitali moved like a striking viper, and she had seen the humiliation etched into Evan's face. When Enzo emerged, he looked composed, adjusting his cuffs with the casual air of a man who had just finished a business meeting rather than a demolition of another man's ego. But the moment he saw Mia standing in the narrow staff corridor, his mask slipped. "Mia," he said, his step faltering, "you should be downstairs." "You made it worse," Mia accused, her voice shaking. She pushed off the wall, her hands trembling at her sides. The gratitude she had felt moments ago was being swamped by a tidal wave of terror. She knew Evan. Enzo might know criminals, but she knew Evan's specific brand of malice. "You humiliated him. Enzo, you backed him into a corner." Enzo stopped, his expression hardening not at her, but at the situation. "He was already in a corner, Mia. He was selling you to the Sartoris. Ignoring him was not an option." "But you don't understand him," Mia cried out, the sound echoing off the concrete walls of the back corridor. "He doesn't stop when he is beaten. He escalates. When he feels small, he has to make someone else bleed to feel big again. You just took away the last thing he had, his pride. He's going to come for me. He's going to come for you. Let him come," Enzo said, his voice dropping to that low, subterranean rumble that vibrated in the floorboards. "I told you. I will handle it." "You can't just handle everything with threats and money," Mia argued, stepping closer, poking a finger toward his chest. She was running on adrenaline and fear, heedless of the danger he represented to the rest of the world. "This isn't a business deal. It is my life. You promised to keep me safe, but you just threw gasoline on a fire." "I cut out the rot," Enzo countered, his patience fraying at the edges. He stepped into her space, towering over her, but Mia held her ground. "What did you want me to do? Let him sell you? Let him drag you into a war? He needed to see that you are out of his reach. He convinced me for 2 years that I was worthless," Mia whispered, the fight suddenly draining out of her, leaving her hollow. The admission hung in the air, heavy and suffocating. "He told me that no one else would ever put up with me. He told me I was broken, and that he was the only one charitable enough to love me. And I believed him. Enzo. I stayed because I thought I deserved it." Enzo went still. The anger vanished from his face, replaced by a look of profound, devastating sorrow. He looked at her as if she had just been stabbed in front of him. "He lied," Enzo said. His voice was fierce, urgent. "Do you hear me? That is the lie of a coward. A man who feeds on fear because he has nothing else to offer is not a man. He is a parasite." "I am scared," Mia admitted, tears finally spilling over. "I am scared that he is right. I am scared that I am dragging you down with me. Look at this. You are a king in this city, and I have turned you into a bouncer for my messy life." "Stop it," Enzo commanded softly. He reached out, his hands hovering for a split second before he decided he didn't care about boundaries anymore. He cupped her face, his thumbs brushing away the hot tears. "I have done terrible things in my life, Mia," Enzo confessed, his eyes searching hers with a vulnerability that stunned her. "I have broken men. I have made hard choices. I sleep fine at night, but seeing you flinch, seeing you look at a shadow and tremble, that has become unbearable to me. It tears me apart." Mia stared up at him, her breath hitching. The intensity in his eyes was consuming. "If I am making it worse," Enzo said, his voice rough, "if you want me to walk away, Tell me right now. Tell me to go. And I will vanish. I will leave you alone. But as long as you let me stay, as long as you are near me, I will protect you. At any cost, even if the cost is me. The offer hung between them. Total freedom. He would leave if she asked. Mia looked at him. This dangerous, complicated man who had just crushed a man's hand to defend her honor. She should tell him to go. It would be safer. It would be simpler. But she didn't want simple. She wanted him. Don't go, Mia whispered. She stepped closer, eliminating the last inch of space between them. She reached up, her hands tangling in the lapels of his suit jacket. Enzo let out a ragged breath, a sound of surrender, and lowered his mouth to hers. This kiss was different from the one in the bathroom. That had been tentative, an exploration. This was desperate. It was a collision. Enzo's arms wrapped around her waist, pulling her flush against him, lifting her slightly so she was on her toes. His mouth was hot, demanding, pouring all the frustration and fear of the last hour into the contact. Mia met him with equal force. She opened to him, her hands sliding up his chest to lock around his neck. She felt the heavy beat of his heart against her palms, racing just as fast as hers, the walls she had built to keep people out. The walls he had built to keep his emotions in, they crumbled into dust. Enzo pressed her gently back against the hallway wall, shielding her with his body. His hand slid up her spine, tangling in her hair, tilting her head back to deepen the kiss. It was overwhelming, a flood of sensation, the smell of his sandalwood cologne, the rough texture of his jaw, the solid strength of his arms. They broke apart only when their lungs demanded air, but they didn't pull away. They stood with their foreheads touching, sharing the same space, breathing the same air. Enzo let out a shaky laugh, a sound of pure relief. "You are dangerous! Mia Carter!" Mia laughed too, a wet, breathless sound. "I told you I was trouble." "I like trouble," Enzo murmured, brushing his thumb over her swollen lip. "I am scared," Mia whispered, closing her eyes. "I am scared of losing myself in this, in you, and I am scared of losing you to your world." "I am scared too," Enzo admitted. He kissed her forehead, a lingering seal of a promise. "For the first time in years, I have something to lose." The days that followed were a strange, suspended reality. Evan had vanished, at least for now. The 48-hour deadline had passed, and there was no sign of him in the city. Enzo's men reported that he had not been seen at his usual haunts. Mia knew better than to think it was over, but she allowed herself to breathe. The dynamic between her and Enzo shifted. He was no longer just the owner of Lanaut, and she was no longer just the bartender he was protecting. They were navigating the uncharted waters of a relationship that had started in the middle of a storm. 3 days after the confrontation, Enzo waited for her after her shift. "I want to cook for you," he said. He looked almost nervous, shifting his weight from one foot to the other. "At my place, away from the club, away from the noise." Mia hesitated. Going to his home was a significant step. It was crossing the final boundary from professional to personal. "Just dinner," Enzo added quickly. "No expectations. I want you to see me. Not Enzo Vitali, the boss, just me." Mia looked at him. She saw the sincerity in his eyes. She realized that she needed that too. She needed to know if they could exist in a quiet room without a crisis to bind them together. "Okay," Mia said, "but I have rules." Enzo raised an eyebrow, a small smile playing on his lips. "Rules? I need to feel safe," Mia said firmly. "I don't like feeling trapped. If I want to leave, I leave. No arguments, no bodyguards blocking the door. You have the key to the door," Enzo promised, solemnity returning to his face. "You are not a prisoner, Mia. You never will be." Enzo's penthouse was exactly what she expected, and nothing like she expected. It was located on the top floor of the tallest building in Harborview, a sprawling space of glass and steel with a panoramic view of the city's skyline. It was luxurious, filled with modern art and Italian leather furniture, but it was also cold. It felt like a showroom, not a home, until they got to the kitchen. The kitchen was warm, The lights were dimmed to a golden glow, and soft jazz played from a speaker in the corner. "I am making risotto," Enzo announced, rolling up the sleeves of his white dress shirt. "My mother's recipe. If I ruin it, do not tell anyone." Mia sat on a bar stool at the island, watching him. "I didn't peg you for a cook. I am a man of many hidden talents," Enzo said, grabbing a knife. 10 minutes later, Mia was laughing so hard she had to hold her side. "You are butchering that onion," she gasped, sliding off the stool. "Enzo, stop. It is a vegetable, not an enemy of the state." Enzo looked at the pile of unevenly chopped onion on the cutting board, feigning indignation. "It is rustic. It is a disaster," Mia teased. She walked around the island and gently bumped her hip against his, nudging him aside. "Move over. Let a professional handle this." Enzo stepped back, surrendering the knife. He leaned against the counter, crossing his arms, and watched her. His eyes were not predatory. They were soft, filled with a quiet wonder as he watched her hands move deftly with the knife. He watched the way her hair fell over her face, the way she bit her lip in concentration. "You are beautiful when you are bossy," Enzo commented. Mia paused, glancing up at him. "I am not bossy. I am efficient." "Bossy," Enzo insisted. Grinning, they cooked together, a dance of bumping elbows and passing ingredients. The tension of the last week melted away in the steam of the risotto. They ate at a small table by the window, the city lights twinkling below them like a carpet of diamonds. They didn't talk about Evan. They didn't talk about the Mafia. They talked about music. They talked about the worst customers they had ever served. They talked about the places they wanted to travel to. For the first time in 2 years, Mia felt light. After dinner, they moved to the large velvet sofa in the living room. Enzo poured 2 glasses of red wine, but Mia stuck to water. She wanted to be clear-headed. They sat close, their knees touching. The distance between them was magnetic, a pull that was becoming harder to resist. "Tell me about your father," Enzo said softly. "You mentioned him once, that you are estranged." Mia looked down at her hands. The atmosphere in the room was heavy with intimacy, the kind that invited secrets. "He was hard," Mia said, picking her words carefully. "He was a military man, strict. He believed that emotions were weakness. He used to tell me that if I cried, I was giving the enemy a weapon." Enzo listened, his gaze fixed on her profile. He didn't interrupt. He didn't offer platitudes. He just witnessed her. "When I met Evan," Mia continued, her voice quiet, "he was so intense. He made me feel everything. I thought the drama, the fighting, the jealousy. I thought that was passion. I thought that was what love looked like. I thought that if it didn't hurt, it wasn't real." She looked up at Enzo. "My father taught me to endure pain," she whispered. "He never taught me how to walk away from it." Enzo set his glass down on the coffee table. He reached out and took her hand, his thumb tracing small, soothing circles on her knuckles. "You should not have had to learn that," Enzo said, his voice thick with emotion. "Love is not endurance. Mia, love is peace. It is the place where you put down the armor." Mia felt a tear slide down her cheek. She didn't wipe it away. She leaned into him, resting her head on his shoulder. He felt solid. He felt like a wall that was there to hold her up, not keep her in. "I am learning," she whispered, "but it is hard to rewrite the map." "We will rewrite it," Enzo said. "Together." He turned his head, his lips brushing against her hair. Mia lifted her face. Their eyes met, and the air in the room seemed to ignite. Enzo didn't rush. He moved with the slow, deliberate patience of a man who had waited a lifetime for this moment. He leaned in, giving her every opportunity to back away. Mia didn't back away. She leaned forward. When their lips met, it wasn't an explosion, it was a homecoming. Enzo kissed her slowly, savoring the taste of her. His hand came up to cup her jaw, his fingers threading into the hair at the nape of her neck. Mia made a soft sound in her throat, her hand sliding up his chest to grip his shoulders. They sank deeper into the plush sofa. Enzo shifted, turning his body toward her, pulling her closer until there was no air left between them. The kiss grew deeper, more urgent, a conversation of tongues and breath. Mia felt a heat unfurl in her belly, a fierce, demanding desire that swept away the last of her hesitation. She wanted this. She wanted him. She wanted to feel his weight, his warmth, his reality. Enzo pulled back slightly, his forehead resting against hers. His breathing was ragged. "Mia," he rasped, his voice dark with want. "Are you sure?" "Yes," Mia whispered, her hands moving to cradle his face. "I am safe here." Enzo let out a shuddering breath. He kissed her again, lingering and passionate, his hands moving to her waist, pulling her flush against him. The city lights blurred in the background, the world outside ceasing to exist. As they continued to kiss, sinking into the cushions, the camera of the mind pulled back. It lingered on their intertwined hands, his scarred, large hand enveloping hers, protective and gentle. It lingered on the softness of the light and the genuine connection between two broken people finding their edges. The scene faded into the velvet darkness of the night, leaving the intimacy sacred, unspoken and deeply felt. The peace that had settled over Enzo Vitali's penthouse lasted exactly 3 days. It was a fragile, crystalline thing, beautiful to look at but terrified of a heavy hand. And Evan Blake was nothing if not heavy-handed. It started with a phone call at 6 in the morning. Enzo took it on the balcony, wrapping a silk robe around himself against the chill of the sunrise. Mia watched him from the bed, her eyes half open, tracing the tension that stiffened his shoulders as he listened. She did not need to hear the voice on the other end to know that the storm they had been waiting for had finally made landfall. Enzo hung up and walked back into the room. His face was a mask of granite. "He did not leave," Enzo said. Mia sat up, pulling the sheet to her chest. The dread that pooled in her stomach was cold and familiar. "Evan? He's still in Harborview," Enzo confirmed, his voice tight. "My sources tell me he has linked up with a splinter group from the docks. Low-level thugs, desperate men. He's planning something for tonight at Lanaut. He thinks if he makes a big enough scene, if he hurts my business and humiliates you, he can buy his way into the Sartori crew." "He is insane," Mia whispered. "He is cornered," Enzo corrected. He walked to the edge of the bed, sitting down heavily. "I want you to take the week off. I have a safe house in the countryside. Marco will drive you. You will be safe there until I clean this up." Mia looked at him. She saw the fear behind his eyes, fear for her. It would be so easy to say yes. It would be so easy to run, to hide in a house with locked doors and armed guards and wait for the men to finish their violence. That was what she had done for 2 years. She had hidden. She had made herself small. "No," Mia said. Enzo blinked, surprised. "Mia, this is not a negotiation. He's coming to the club." "Then I will be there," Mia said, throwing the covers off and standing up. Her legs were shaking, but her chin was high. "I am working my shift." "Enzo." "Absolutely not." Enzo stood up, his voice rising. "I'm not letting you walk into a firing line." "I am done running," Mia shouted, the sound startling them both. She took a breath, stepping closer to him. "If I run now, Enzo, I will run for the rest of my life. I let him chase me out of my apartment. I let him chase me out of my own head. If I hide while you fight my battles, he wins. He still controls me." Enzo stared at her. He saw the terror in her eyes, but he also saw a steel resolve that matched his own. She was terrified. Yes, but she was refusing to yield to it. "I need to stand my ground," Mia said, her voice dropping to a plea. "I need to know that I can stand in that room and not break. I need to do this." Enzo looked at her for a long, agonizing minute. He wanted to lock her in the tower. He wanted to wrap her in cotton and keep the world away, but he realized that stealing her agency now would be no better than what Evan had done. "Fine," Enzo said, the word tasting like ash. "You work, but you stay behind the bar, and Marco stays within 5 feet of you all night." Friday night at Lanaut was usually a symphony of controlled chaos. The bass thrummed in the floorboards, the lights swept across the crowd in waves of purple and gold, and the air smelled of expensive perfume and anticipation. Mia stood at her station, mixing drinks with mechanical precision. Her hands were steady, though her heart was beating a frantic rhythm against her ribs. Marco was there, looming at the end of the bar like a gargoyle in a tuxedo, his eyes scanning every face that walked through the door. For 3 hours. Nothing happened. The club filled up. The music grew louder. Mia began to hope that the intel was wrong, that Evan had lost his nerve. Then, the front doors swung open. It wasn't a subtle entrance. The bouncers at the front stepped aside, not out of respect, but out of confusion as a group of 6 men pushed their way in. They were not dressed for la notte. They wore denim jackets, heavy boots, and expressions of jagged aggression. In the center of the pack was Evan. He looked manic. His eyes were wide and darting, sweat glistening on his forehead. He didn't look like a mastermind. He looked like a man who had pulled the pin on a grenade and was holding it tight, waiting for everyone to admire the explosion. "Turn it off," Evan screamed, his voice cracking. The DJ, seeing the commotion and the aggressive way the men were shoving patrons aside, cut the music. The sudden silence was deafening. The crowd turned, confusion rippling through the room. "Mia!" Evan shouted, scanning the room wildly. "Mia, get out here!" Mia froze behind the bar. She felt the blood drain from her face. Every instinct screamed at her to duck, to hide behind the counter. But she remembered her promise to herself. She gripped the edge of the mahogany bar and stood tall. Evan saw her. A twisted grin spread across his face. "There she is," Evan sneered. He marched toward the bar, his crew flanking him. Patrons scrambled out of their way, sensing the violence radiating off them. "You think you can hide in this ivory tower? You think you are better than me?" "Go home, Evan," Mia said. Her voice was shaking, but it was audible in the silent club. "You are embarrassing yourself." "I am taking what is mine," Evan yelled. One of his associates, a man with a scar running through his eyebrow, lunged forward. He reached over the bar, his hand clamping around Mia's upper arm. "Come on, sweetheart," the thug grunted. "Time to go." Mia yanked back, panic flashing hot and white through her system. "Don't touch me." She tried to pull away, but his grip was slippery and hard. She grabbed a bottle of vodka from the well, ready to swing it, ready to fight. "I would release her if I were you." The voice came from everywhere and nowhere. It was not a shout. It was a death sentence spoken in a whisper. Enzo Vitali stepped out of the shadows of the VIP section. He was not alone. 10 of his security staff materialized from the corners of the room, surrounding Evan's small, ragged crew, but no one was looking at the guards. They were looking at Enzo. He wore a black suit, immaculately tailored. His face was devoid of all human emotion. He did not look angry. He looked like the end of the world. The thug holding Mia's arm froze. He looked at Enzo, then at the wall of muscle closing in around them. He released Mia as if she were burning hot iron and stepped back, holding his hands up. "Get them out," Enzo said to his men, gesturing vaguely at Evan's crew. It happened in seconds. Enzo's security moved with efficient, brutal professionalism. They grabbed the 5 thugs, ignoring their protests, and dragged them toward the exit. "Hey, get off them!" Evan shouted, spinning around. "You can't do this. I have people. You have nothing," Enzo said. The room was empty now, save for the terrified patrons pressing themselves against the walls, the staff, and the 3 people in the center of the dance floor, Mia behind the bar, Enzo standing 10 feet away, and Evan isolated in the middle. Enzo walked slowly toward a heavy oak table in the center of the VIP lounge area, sitting down on the edge of it. He looked at Evan. "I gave you a chance," Enzo said. "I gave you money. I gave you a way out. You chose this." "I chose to fight for her," Evan screamed, pointing a shaking finger at Mia. He was unraveling, his chest heaving. "She belongs to me. Vitali, you can't just buy her. You can't just steal my girl and think I'm going to walk away. She is not a car." "Evan," Enzo said, his voice terrifyingly calm. "You do not own the title?" "I made her," Evan spat, lunging toward the bar again. He was delirious with rage, blind to the danger. "Mia, tell him. Tell him you belong to me. Tell him you are coming with me." He reached for her again, his hand clawing at the air, his face twisted into a mask of pure entitlement. Enzo moved. It was a blur of motion that the eye could barely track. He intercepted Evan before he could reach the bar. He didn't punch him. He grabbed Evan's wrist, the same wrist he had squeezed in the lounge days ago, and twisted. Evan howled, spinning around as his arm was wrenched behind his back. Enzo marched him forward and slammed his hand down onto the oak table, palm flat, fingers splayed. "No, no!" Evan shrieked, struggling, but Enzo's other hand was planted in the center of Evan's back, pinning him to the wood. The entire club held its breath. The silence was thick, heavy with the promise of violence. Enzo leaned down, his face inches from Evan's ear. He wasn't looking at Evan. He was looking at Mia. He was looking at her wide, terrified eyes, ensuring she saw this, ensuring she saw the monster being declawed. "I told you," Enzo growled, his voice vibrating through the room like thunder. "Nobody touches what is mine." With a sudden, deliberate movement, Enzo shifted his weight. He gripped Evan's wrist with both hands and applied pressure. He didn't break it quickly. He crushed it. He pressed the bones of Evan's hand against the hard edge of the table, grinding them down with controlled, merciless force. A sickening crunch echoed through the quiet club. Evan screamed. It was a raw, high-pitched sound of agony that tore through the air. His knees buckled, but Enzo held him up, keeping the pressure on the destroyed hand for one long, agonizing second. "Do you understand?" Enzo roared over Evan's screams. "She is done with you!" He released the wrist. Evan collapsed to the floor, cradling his mangled hand against his chest, sobbing. He curled into a ball. The fight completely drained out of him. He looked small. He looked broken. Mia stood behind the bar, her hands covering her mouth. She was shaking. It was violent. It was ugly. But as she watched Evan sobbing on the floor, the man who had terrorized her, who had made her feel small for years, she realized something profound. He wasn't a monster. He was just a man, and he could be stopped. Enzo stood over him, adjusting his cuffs. He looked at Marco. "Call them in." The doors to the club opened again, this time. It wasn't thugs. It was the Harborview Police Department. 4 uniformed officers marched in, followed by a man in a sharp gray suit, Enzo's lawyer. "What is this?" Evan whimpered, looking up at the cops through his tears. "He broke my hand. Arrest him. He assaulted me." The lead officer looked at Evan, then at Enzo. He looked at the lawyer, who handed him a thick file. "Evan Blake," the officer asked. "Yes, help me." "You are under arrest," the officer said, pulling out cuffs. "What?" Evan screamed. "For what? I am the victim." "For grand larceny, fraud, and outstanding warrants in 3 counties, the officer recited, hauling Evan up. He wasn't gentle with the broken hand. "And we have a statement from your associates regarding conspiracy to commit arson at this establishment." Enzo had not just broken Evan physically, he had dismantled him legally. He had ensured that when Evan left tonight, he wasn't going to the hospital and then back to the streets. He was going to a prison cell for a very long time. "No!" Evan shouted as they dragged him away. He looked back at Mia, his eyes wide with disbelief. "Mia, Mia, help me!" Mia lowered her hands from her mouth. She looked at him. She saw the desperation, and for the first time, she felt nothing. No fear, no guilt, no pity. "Goodbye, Evan," she whispered. The doors closed behind him. The adrenaline in the room crashed. The patrons began to murmur. The lights came back on. Enzo turned to the room. "Drinks are on the house for the rest of the night. Anyone who wants to leave may do so." He didn't wait for a reaction. He walked straight to the bar, walked behind it, and wrapped his arm around Mia's waist. "Office," he said, his voice rough. "Now." The door to Enzo's office clicked shut, cutting off the noise of the club. Mia stood in the center of the room. Her legs finally gave out. She sank onto the leather sofa, her entire body trembling with the aftershocks of the confrontation. Enzo poured a glass of water, his own hands shaking slightly. He brought it to her, kneeling on the floor in front of her. "Drink," he said gently. Mia took a sip, her teeth chattering against the glass. She handed it back to him and looked at his face. He looked exhausted. He looked remorseful. "I am sorry," Enzo said, looking down at his hands, the hands that had just crushed bone. "I did not want you to see that. It was ugly." "It was," Mia agreed softly. "It was terrible. I'm a violent man. Mia," Enzo said, his voice hollow. "I try to keep it hidden, but it is who I am. I frightened you." "You did," Mia said. She reached out. Taking his face in her hands, she forced him to look at her. "But you didn't hurt me. You stopped him. For 2 years, I waited for someone to stop him. I waited for someone to stand between us." Tears welled in her eyes, spilling over. "You are the first person," she whispered, "who put themselves in front of me without asking me to be quiet about the pain." Enzo let out a ragged breath. He leaned forward, resting his forehead against hers. "I would burn the world for you," he murmured. "I don't need the world burned," Mia cried softly. "I just need you." He wrapped his arms around her, pulling her off the sofa and onto the floor with him. He held her tight, his embrace protective, encompassing. It wasn't sexual. It was an anchor in the storm. Mia buried her face in his neck, smelling the scent of him, soap, starch, and the metallic tang of adrenaline. She cried, letting go of 2 years of fear. Enzo held her through it, rocking her gently, his hand stroking her hair, whispering Italian endearments that she didn't understand but felt in her bones. They stayed like that for a long time. When the tears stopped, Mia pulled back slightly. She looked at him, her eyes red but clear. She leaned in and kissed him. It was a slow, tender kiss. It tasted of salt and relief. It was a promise made in the quiet aftermath of war. Enzo kissed her back with a reverence that belied the violence he was capable of, his hands tracing the line of her spine, holding her as if she were the most precious thing in his empire. Weeks later, the seasons had turned. The biting wind of late autumn had given way to the crisp, clean air of early winter. Evan Blake was gone. The charges had stuck. Enzo's lawyer was worth every penny, and he was currently awaiting trial in a facility 3 hours away. He would be there for a long time. Mia sat in a brightly lit studio in the city center. It was a night class for interior design. Her sketchbook was open, filled with drawings of light fixtures and open, airy spaces. She was tired. She had worked a shift at the cafe that morning, but it was a good tired. It was the exhaustion of building a future, not surviving a past. She checked her phone. A text from Enzo. "I picked up dinner. Don't be late." She smiled, packing up her pencils. Things were changing. Enzo was still Enzo. He was still the boss. He still commanded respect, but the business was shifting. He had sold off the loan sharking operations. He was investing heavily in real estate and high-end hospitality. He told her it was just smart diversification, but Mia knew the truth. He was cleaning the ledger. He was building a world where she didn't have to look over her shoulder. She drove to La Notte. It was a Monday, causing the club to be closed. She let herself in with her own key. The main lights were off, leaving the club bathed in the warm, amber glow of the bar lamps. Enzo was sitting at a corner table, his suit jacket draped over the back of the chair, his tie undone. He was reading a stack of paperwork, looking like a man carrying a heavy load, but managing it. Mia walked over to him. The sound of her heels on the floor made him look up. His face softened instantly, the hard lines around his eyes smoothed out. "Hey," he said. "Hey," Mia replied. She didn't sit in the chair opposite him. She walked around the table and sat sideways on his lap. Enzo didn't hesitate. His arm came around her waist naturally, pulling her close. He abandoned the paperwork, his attention shifting entirely to her. "How was class?" he asked, nuzzling his face into her neck. "Good," Mia said, resting her arms around his neck. "I designed a lobby. I think you would hate it. It has too much color." "I like color," Enzo murmured against her skin. "I am learning to like it." He pulled back to look at her. He took her hand in his. The camera of the mind focused on their joined hands. Mia's hand was small, pale, and completely free of marks. The bruises were gone. The skin was healed. Enzo's hand was large, the knuckles scarred from a lifetime of fighting, the skin rough. But the way he held her was infinitely gentle. He laced his fingers through hers, a perfect fit of strength and softness. "You look tired," Mia said, tracing the line of his jaw with her free hand. "I am," Enzo admitted, But it is a good tired. Let's go home, Mia whispered. In a minute, Enzo said. He leaned in and kissed her. It was soft, playful, and full of a quiet, fierce joy. The lights of the club hummed around them, a warm cocoon against the dark night outside. Nobody touched what was his. And for the first time in her life, Mia knew that she wasn't a possession to be hoarded. She was a treasure to be cherished, and she was exactly where she chose to be. Thank you so much for listening to the finale of Nobody Touches What's Mine. I hope you enjoyed Mia and Enzo's journey from darkness into the light. It has been an emotional ride writing this story for you. I would love to hear your thoughts on the ending. Did Enzo do the right thing? Let me know in the comments below, and tell me where you are listening from. If you enjoyed this story, please make sure to subscribe to Mafia Romance Stories and hit the bell icon so you never miss a new upload. Your support means the world to me. Until next time.